Wes, we appreciate you being on this morning at a time when you had rather be at the British Open.
It's always good to be with you guys. Thanks for having me. How you doing?
I'm doing fine. After we mention Florida State and Clemson in ACC football, where do we go with the rest of the teams in the ACC this year, football-wise, as to their abilities?
Well, that's a good question, Coach. You know what, Barry, I think you probably have to go back to North Carolina because they won double-figure games a year ago. I think they bring back just about every – they do replace the quarterback, but I happen to be one of these guys that believes that going to Mitch Trubisky won't be as big a deal maybe as it would be at other places because I think he's got more of actually the skill set Larry Fedora looks for in that offensive system. But Carolina brings back a lot of the personnel on that side of the ball. I think behind Clemson, they could have the second-best offense in the league. And I think Clemson's going to have one of the dynamic offenses in all of college football this year. So defensively, they should be better. They open with Georgia in Atlanta on the 3rd. I think it's a huge game for Carolina. I think it's a bigger game for Georgia, by the way. But I think Carolina's probably right now on paper one of those teams.
Okay.
But I think there are a lot of contenders. And I think that, Florida State and Clemson are going to dominate the preseason of the ACC. Next week in Charlotte at the ACC event, much like the one the SEC, well, there's nothing quite like the one the SEC has, so I shouldn't say that. But the ACC has a similar media event in terms of its process, I guess. I'll be as interested as anybody else to see who they pick to win the Coastal Division and then, kind of how all this will fall together because I think there's some teams. I think Miami's a team that could catch some of that first-year coaching magic in a bottle, if you will. I think Mark Richt is probably a really good choice at this particular time for that program. They've got an outstanding quarterback in Brad Kaya. So I'll be interested to see kind of how this falls out. I don't know that there's anybody, though, that can contend with Florida State and Clemson.
Okay.
I think what Clemson's done is really, really impressive on a national scale to build that program back. And then Florida State has kind of survived the gap year after Jameis Winston. And if they get their quarterback situation figured out, if you will, between Sean McGuire and DeAndre Francois, they've got a great running back. I mean, Dalvin Cook is you can get Leonard Fournette, and then all of a sudden you get to the Dalvin Cook name pretty quick as one of the best backs in college football.
Barry?
We're talking with Wes Durham. Wes, I wanted to ask you, SEC Media Days, as you said, it's a spectacle. I was my first time over there. Dad and I did Radio Row, but that was interesting, especially the day that Nick Saban was there. I wanted to ask you the little deal that happened. I think what happened there with Coach Saban, and I don't think he meant for this to happen. I don't know if you could improve it, but I think he did. I think it helps recruiting, and I think it helps bring his team closer together. What I mean by that is he's defending his players. He doesn't care what the outside people think. Does he condone what happened? No. We had one of the parents of one of the players on yesterday talking about how much he loved that and how much he appreciated what Nick Saban did in his doing for his son, that he really cares about the kid as a whole. I wanted to get you to comment about what happened there, and I think it brought their team closer and maybe help parents say, you know what, that guy really cares about the kids. He doesn't care what other people say. I want to hear what you had to say about that.
One thing I'll say about Coach Saban and the respect I have for him stems from the fact that he uses this term, the process, that some people really, kind of think is probably tiresome at some point, guys. But the reality of it is the process is a lot more than just winning games.
Right.
The process is a point about the way the culture has been built in Tuscaloosa. And I say this on a regular basis, and I don't have to be on your show in Tuscaloosa to say it. I don't have to be on shows in the state of Alabama. Football at the University of Alabama is very, very important, okay? It's very important. It's probably more important to the University of Alabama than it is at any other school in the country. A lot of people can say it's important there, but you can see that it's important at the University of Alabama. And he has done a marvelous job of building the football program at the University of Alabama to really, in the modern era and the most competitive era of college football, to where it's the gold standard. I mean, it is the absolute gold standard as it comes to success in the sport right now. So for him to come out and defend, those two guys and the situation they were in, when the white-hot focus and attention can be on his program for success, off-the-field distractions, doing those things, yeah, it absolutely speaks to the allegiance that he pledges to those players and to those parents in respect as well. So I wasn't surprised to see it. I wasn't surprised to hear that it became contentious with Paul. I'm not sure that, Paul might have wanted it to become contentious just based on some of the embracing of the debate that ESPN and the SEC network gets to at times.
Yes, sir.
But, no, I would tell you that I think Coach Saban does an incredible job of protecting the brand of the University of Alabama in a lot of ways, too. And this may be the latest example of it, if that makes sense.
It's a good point. I think you're right. They embrace trying to stir up as much as they can sometimes. And it's interesting always to see somebody that is not close to the University of Alabama make some comments like you did, because a lot of people feel the other way. But I think Barry doesn't realize that some of them think that means lack of discipline, when I'm not sure that it does. Anyway,
let me add this real quick. I think here's the deal. Okay, I think, and I say this with great respect. I'm not saying this to indict anybody there. They're the closest thing at the collegiate level to a professional football team. And I mean that by saying, look at the infrastructure of that football program. Look at the way the resources have been designed to help that football program be successful. And that's a commitment that the university and a lot of other people have made to make sure that the University of Alabama is at that level and give them the best chance to win national championships and SEC titles and so on and so forth. And I know it's important because of, 105,000 show up 6 times a year or 7 times a year. So in that light, what I'm saying is that he is at the forefront. He is the true CEO of the University of Alabama football program. And therefore, he's going to do everything to make sure that company, quote unquote, is successful. And if it's playing on the field, or if it's protecting the interest of the 2 young men involved in the incident, or if it's making sure his schedule's the right way, or having a facility that does this, or a person that does that, or, Coach Cochran, the strength and conditioning guy, is the highest paid guy in the country. Yeah, that's an important part of protecting the resource that is the football program at the University of Alabama.
Yeah, they spend money to make money, and that's something most presidents don't do. And I think that's the big key. I'm going to change over to the pros. I don't know how much you want to answer this. I don't think it's not a bad question. Tom Brady.
Yeah.
It's been going back and forth. It seems to me like, and I know nothing, that the NFL says we're going to show you that we're going to come out on top in this. We're going to get what we feel like should be done, and
right.
Sounds like that's what's going to happen.
Well, I think realistically, the entire thing has now become a distraction for the National Football League because it simply will not go away. And the New England Patriots and Tom Brady were content to fight this thing all the way to the very last straw. And therefore, that's why it continued to go on. And look, the bottom line is that you get into, there was something wrong with the footballs, okay? Something happened to the footballs. Now, granted, when you start down the judicial road of an NFL investigation, we're not talking about, criminal investigations or what have you, but at the same time, they're still trying to figure out exactly what went on. And there are a lot of things that point to the fact that Tom Brady knew about those footballs and had contact with the people that might have been involved with reducing the air pressure in those footballs.
Okay.
And whether or not that made a difference in him winning the ball game or him winning the Super Bowl or what have you is still to be determined. But I will say this. It certainly points to the fact that he knew those footballs were going to have less air in them. And if he did, then that is a competitive advantage and something that the NFL needs to address from a suspension or, violation perspective.
It's interesting. It's good stuff. Ooh, real good stuff. Barry?
I want to ask you about Tim Duncan.
Sure.
Tim Duncan, to me, there's just not enough guys like him. I heard Popovich say, usually we get these guys in here, we got to get them over themselves first before we can start coaching them. Tim's always been over himself. He's made hundreds and hundreds of people in this organization a great living. And Tim did it his way. He had Popovich basically announce his retirement. Just talk about a guy like Tim Duncan. And now the media's just kind of let it go where you got to be praising a guy like this. I love Kobe Bryant, but Tim Duncan wasn't going to get on one of these tours in the last game. Everybody told him how great he is. He just kind of faded away. Talk about Tim.
Well, if you know as well as I do, because you're great friends with Dave Odom. And that young man's been that way since he showed up from the Virgin Islands. He did not live for the spotlight. He enjoyed playing basketball, but he never lived to play basketball. And I think the one thing about Tim Duncan that always impressed me, and I got to see him in all 4 years, 2 when I was doing Vanderbilt, and the last 2 of his career when I was at Georgia Tech. And I'll tell you this, the people that I knew who were around him as a student at Wake Forest always told me how easygoing a guy he was and how he was much, much more than just a basketball player. He was a pretty good student, and he enjoyed, friends socially and so forth. He was defined as a person a lot more by than just his basketball exploits. So at the end of the day, Barry, I'm not surprised he shut it down the way he did. I think he knew even going into last year that last year was going to be his final season. And there are just other things he wants to do and other things he probably wants to accomplish. But it does speak to the fact that some guys want to go on farewell tours. That Kobe Bryant felt compelled to tell everybody it was his final year, things of that nature. I never would have thought that, just knowing what I do about Tim Duncan, that he was going to be one of those guys to sit there and tell you, hey, by the way, this is going to be it. And in lieu of that, I'm probably going to get honored at a lot of different places. Tim Duncan doesn't want to call attention to himself. He's the guy always using examples to student athletes at the collegiate level, because when they see him interviewed, he never looks like he doesn't enjoy doing the interview. It's not his favorite thing to do, but he's never rude, and he's not one of these guys that, demeans the fact that he's got to speak to the media. But yet I know for a fact he can't stand it. He does not enjoy interacting with the media. It's just not who he is as a person. And I used him as an example to a rising junior at Georgia Tech on the football team one time. And I said, you need to go find all the Tim Duncan interviews you can, because you're like him. He doesn't really enjoy working with the media. And just a couple months ago, I got a text from Calvin Johnson after he retired saying, by the way, thanks for back in the day telling me about Tim Duncan. It helped me get through my career.
Wow.
I mean, that's the one thing that always struck me about Tim. He knew it was something he had to do. He didn't have to enjoy it, but he also never had to let you know how much he didn't enjoy it.
Well, before we let you go, and I thank you so much for being on today. You're always great about every
Well, it's
section.
fun to do. Always fun to do with you guys.
Tell me, we got a lot of Falcon fans listening to this game, listening to this interview. Tell me about Atlanta.
Well, they're going to be okay. Training camp starts 2 weeks from yesterday. And obviously that guy that wore number 8 in Tuscaloosa and wears number 11 over here at wide receiver is pretty good. One of those guys that I think you could coach well. He's just talented and athletic enough to make some plays, right?
Yeah, that's right.
But I think they'll be better, but their schedule is really difficult. They play division games in 3 of the first 4 weeks. They go to the Mountain or Pacific time zone 3 times in the first 6 weeks, with games in Oakland, Denver, and Seattle. So I don't know. They went 8-8 last year, but the NFC South has really gotten competitive quick. I think Tampa's much improved. Obviously, Carolina had a great year last year. And if New Orleans can get some stuff settled with the salary cap, I think they'll be pretty good again. So Atlanta will have their work cut out for them. Plus, they're playing the AFC West this year. The South is the NFC South. So that AFC West is also an area that, that's a pretty good division. I think Oakland has really, really gotten better. In addition to the fact that I think San Diego and Kansas City and obviously Denver are good too. So we'll see what happens. I think it'll be a good year for Atlanta. They got to stay healthy. That's always the big. It's always one of the big quotients for success in the NFL.
Well, I'm going to give you a parting tip on golf. I was with
Jeff Sluman. Pay for this later?
Hang up right now. Hang up.
Jeff Sluman and I are buddies. Slu won the PGA several years ago, and
right, I remember him.
I was watching him play the other day in the tournament here, and he sent somebody over to get me, and so when he came to get me, I said, and he was on the practice tee, he'd gotten through, so I said, okay, I need a lesson. He wants me to hit it with my right shoulder. I'm tired of trying to separate the bottom from the top. So I'm just going to swing it all at the same time, put the right shoulder under, not out, but put it under. And I'm going to hit the golf ball with the right shoulder rather than hit it with the lower part of the body. There'll be no charge for that, and you can try to see how it works.
Is that right? Yeah. Well, you'll be glad to know, Barry, you'll really appreciate this. Wimp, I have spent Vicki and I live outside of Atlanta now, up here in Cartersville, Georgia.
Yeah.
And the last 3 days, they got, I think, another day and a half left. We've had one of those summer basketball showcases near our hometown.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And as you well know, Wimp, during the recruiting season, with all that, you end up around some coaches. But for your benefit, I want you to know that they're having one of those officials evaluation camps, for guys who want to be good referees.
You want me to come over?
Well, I was getting ready to say, I mentioned last night when you sent me the text about being on there, I was going to be on with you. And they said, and two of the officials, really established guys in college basketball, looked at me and said, you know what, we need him back in the game. I looked at him, I said, no, the hell you don't.
Drop the mic. Drop the mic on that one.
Hit it with your right shoulder. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Wes.
All right, boys. Take care. Always fun. Have a great rest of the summer. We'll talk in the fall, I hope.